Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Happiness Playbook series podcast. I am here today, Ria Flanagan, with Brent Peake, who is an LPC counselor at North Valley Therapy. And he's going to talk to you a little bit about what he does. And we used to work together. So I'm so excited to bring him here. And he works a lot with couples. I do very little. I do some somatic coaching, but he really loves the couples world. And there's always a need for that. One of his buzzwords is learning how to help them communicate and connect. So who can't use more of that? And, and just as I'm always saying, my Happiness Playbook or Happiness is an Inside Job Playbook book is out on Amazon. And I am bringing in other counselors, other people to share about, what brings them joy, what helps them with their clients reach more joy, passion, and love in their life. And Brent's also going to talk to us a little bit about meaning. And I'm really excited to dive in. So Brent, welcome. Can you tell us a
Thank you,
little
Ria.
bit about what you specialize in?
Yeah, I'm Brent Peake, owner of North Valley Therapy in Phoenix, and I do a lot of work with couples and I do a lot of work with trauma. And I haven't really figured out a way to differentiate the two because I tell my clients the dots always connect between whatever degree of dysfunction we experienced in childhood and those tools, whether they work or not, that we try to use to deal with what's getting in the way of our relationships. So I enjoy working with what I call stable but stale couples who don't communicate and connect the way they used to and want to be able to do that again. So I do that by teaching couples how to communicate vulnerably with each other about their emotions, even the guys. And, recognizing that it is our relationships that can bring us some of the greatest happiness in our life, but also be one of the biggest blocks to that in our life. So I spend a lot of time helping couples notice the dysfunctional patterns, notice where a lot of their unhelpful tools come from, how they learn to navigate, again, whatever that dysfunction was in their childhood or in their family of origin, and unlearn some of those things and then learn some new ways to communicate in ways that really help them connect deeply, even when they're talking about some of the issues that they have just never been able to talk about successfully without blowing up or going silent.
And I mean, I think that's something that's so needed. And, people, I kind of grew up in that fairy tale world of, yeah, we're just going to, go off into the sunset, marry our Prince Charming. And, life is just not like that. That is not real.
Yeah.
And, good marriages go through struggles. They go through ups and downs. They, and I love that they can get stale, right? There's not that, I deal a lot with the sex addiction and getting into fantasy and love addiction. And so, sometimes when that honeymoon's over, and you're 10
Yeah.
years in and you're like, and I know also, a lot of couples therapists deal with affairs and things like that because they're looking for that excitement maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It is okay to look for happiness in your relationship, but a lot of times the things that bring people together and keep things feeling really good in the beginning of the relationship aren't necessarily going to be the best tools to help maintain a long-term relationship of deep joy, deep happiness, deep love for each other. And so at some point, the shininess wears off, and yeah, sometimes people turn to other sources of happiness.
Yeah.
And so the distinction that I make with people is that we need to stop looking at our partner as a source of happiness in our life, but rather as a support for our happiness. The source of happiness needs to come from within. And that's where the couples work connects so strongly with inner child work, trauma work. Again, whatever degree of dysfunction we grew up in, none of us grew up with perfect parents. We all saw our parents handle things sometimes well, sometimes not so well. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, we saw our parents handle things not so well a lot of the time. And we tried to find whatever degree of stability and safety that we could by working around that. And what I have to teach people is that there are things that we have learned how to work around that with whatever brings us discomfort in our life, to unlearn those strategies, whether it's avoidance, whether it's, most of the what Terry Real calls the losing strategies. He wrote the book, The New Rules of Marriage, which I ask all my couples to read. And I
What's it
love it.
called?
The New Rules of Marriage by Terry Real. I love his work because he does a great job of connecting those dots between whatever degree of dysfunction we grew up in and its contribution to what's not working so well in our relationship now. And so most of the losing strategies boil down to, how can I get you to do this? How can I get you to stop doing that? How can I get my husband to listen to me? How can I get my wife to stop nagging me? And I usually tell people, anytime that you think the solution is getting someone to do this, do that, stop doing this, stop doing that, you're trying to move out of a relationship position and into a management position. And your partner or spouse does not like being managed by you. But we think we're going to find happiness by trying to get someone else to do something differently. And that's where we make the mistake of acting as if, even if we wouldn't say this explicitly, but acting as if that other person is a source of our happiness. And therefore, if they're not doing what we want them to do, they are the source of our unhappiness. And
The blame game.
both are mistakes. Both are mistakes. So I teach people how to communicate vulnerably, but still assertively, with healthy boundaries in place, so that they can connect around these issues that have just been pitfalls and traps in the past. So that even when talking about a really difficult topic, they can still feel closer than they ever have. And that's where that support of their inner happiness can happen.
And I would imagine this has a, domino effect with other relationships in their lives, with family members and everything, as they learn the boundaries, and as they learn that their job is not to fix other people, and as they learn that their happiness is, an inside job, it's from within, and they get out of the blaming. And, that can really shift not only marriage, right, but other friendships, coworker relationships.
Yeah.
I think there's such a profound shift when we realize it's not the thing, the person, the success, this that actually is going to sustain happiness. And that's why I talk about sustaining happiness levels, increasing happiness levels. It's not, we're going to feel all the emotions. So that's human. It's not, we're not walking around going, oh, I'm happy all the time, because that's not real. But I think there is something about intentionally living a life, like you were discussing earlier, that you have meaning, you have purpose. It's not about an outside thing so much.
Yeah, I do believe that, and the title of your book, Happiness is an Inside Job. I think that correlates well with the idea that other people can be a support for our happiness, but not a source. It has to come from within. And I do believe that happiness comes from us making a decision about what is going to be meaningful in our life, what meaning we will give it. You talk in your book a bit about, reframing, changing our thoughts. And a lot of therapists will tell you got to change the way you think if you want to change the way you feel. Good old CBT there. And I think that's very true, because what it essentially comes down to is each of us gets to decide what's meaningful to us. But if we haven't been able to tap into something meaningful within ourselves, a healthy self-worth that is determined by how you view yourself, and if applicable, how your higher power views you. I tell a lot of people, I ask a lot of people, what do you think that God thinks about you? God loves me. God thinks I'm great. Well, do you agree with God on that? What's the meaning that we are willing to give to our own self-worth? The trauma we went through as kids keeps us from seeing that. But ultimately, it comes down to what for many of us has been a difficult choice, to determine that I matter no matter what. And I am going to act in a way, I'm going to respond in a way, and I'm going to organize my life around the fact that I matter, I have meaning, even if I'm the only one that thinks so. And if you do think that, I do think you're probably wrong. There's a lot more people out there rooting for you than you realize. But to be able to find that meaning in our life, to recognize that we matter, I think that is ultimately the source of emotional worth and well-being that we would have in our life.
Well, and I think you really nail it. One of the things that I started really doing for my somatic coaching work with couples is having them do the Pia Melody's post-induction therapy work,
Hmm.
the inner child work, the limiting beliefs from childhood and stuff, doing those workshops, both of them before we even do the work, the somatic coaching work.
Yeah.
That has been like life-changing because then they have the same language, they have more compassion for one another, they hear each other in a new way. I mean, again, it has a lot of the boundary and work and everything in it, but they're doing it first within themselves. And I
Yes.
find if they can do that work and then, right, come together for the somatic work that I do, it really seals the deal for change.
So that's what I love about Terry Real's model of couples therapy, relational life therapy, is some of that inner child work gets done within the couple session. And you got to be careful. Not everybody, that's not appropriate for everybody.
Right.
But, you and I worked together at the Meadows. Did you ever do any time on that's not a nice way to put it, but did you ever do any time on the family team there?
No, I sat in. I got to sit
Okay.
in, and then I've sat in a lot with the young adults family work, but I did not run the family group. I didn't work in
So
that.
one of the what I think is the most powerful part of the family program there that I have absolutely kept in the couples work that I do, and it's also a part of Terry Real's relational life therapy model, is to have a couple sit down and be able to talk vulnerably about some of those childhood experiences that were difficult for them that do connect to how they're feeling right now. Because ultimately, most of the time, when a couple is having problems, what's really coming up are these limiting beliefs, whether you believe it about yourself or it looks like the other person seems to think it about you. That I don't matter, I'm not important, I'm powerless, I'm on my own, my feelings don't matter, my thoughts don't matter. All these things that really relate to self-esteem, self-worth, self-compassion. And for a couple to be able to sit down and say, look, I'm doing my best to try to believe that you don't see me that way, but it's hard for me not to see myself that way because of this experience I had in the past with my family, with an abuser, with a dismissive parent, with whoever. And when couples have the safety to be able to communicate like that, it creates empathy, vulnerability, and a connection that for many of them they've never had before. And a lot of couples probably, if they've never had a conversation like that, a lot of them can't imagine being able to do that, or it just feels a little weird. So I love overcoming that with people and helping them really connect.
Yeah.
So yeah, being able to do that inner child work and even in the presence of each other, to share that story and reconnect with the child that we were and offer them what we need so badly right now and that we would like to experience with our partner.
Yeah, that's really powerful, beautiful work and having them understand, get curious and understand each other rather than sort of projecting this whole
Yeah.
other idea of what it's about, because we tend to do that, right? Is sort of make up in our heads what, why they're reacting that way. And it may not have anything to do, right, with what we make up about it. So
Yeah.
I love, just you doing that communication work with them, and that's beautiful. And I have looked at Terry Real's work. I think that's wonderful work. And that it's so important, and so many couples need it, because I think what happens a lot of times is people think, oh, well, I'll get into a new marriage, right? Or I'll get into a new relationship
Yeah.
and then it will solve it, right? And you're like, oh, no, you're going to have the same kind of things come up until you really address the issues. And,
I
you
hear
know,
that from someone and I say to them, you want to do this again with a different person?
yes,
Don't do that.
that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And then to kind of really, at the end of the day, end up where you are again, it's just, it's like walking into the wall, right? So no, and that's always helpful, unless they're in a domestic violence situation. Of course, something like that
Exactly.
is completely different,
Yeah.
and that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
As you were saying, you deal more with the stability, but more there's a staleness, not so much the,
Yeah. I mean, any relationship needs three things for it to really to just get to a baseline of successful. Each person needs to be able to feel safe, and if that's not the case, then I'm I'm not going to ask someone to be vulnerable in a relationship where they don't feel emotionally safe or especially physically safe. But they need to feel safe. They need to be, and then they need to be able to be vulnerable and authentic with each other. But if there's not safety involved, even emotional safety, then you can't force the rest. We've got to get the baseline taken care of first.
Yeah, the psychological, emotional safety is really big because there could be a lot of belittling. There could be the power could be off, be it financial, right? Someone holds the financial power and is belittling the other person. There's all kinds of ways that can show up. It's not always this physical violence or even name calling. It can be really, these underlying currents of abusive behaviors. And I know, gaslighting and all that is a really big word these days, but, it does, you and I have seen it, we worked a lot in treatment and everything. And so we've seen that and how that can really, hurt someone's self-esteem and be crazy making and I think a lot more education's out there about what is gaslighting and, what does that look? I didn't even know I was gaslighting my partner, or I didn't know that's what I would call what my partner's doing. So do you work a little bit with that too? Like helping clients?
I do. Yeah. I've had some training and working with personality disorders. I can't say it's the most fun work as a therapist for me. And a lot of people who come my way are like, I'll get the guy who got sent in by his wife and who told him that she thinks he's a narcissist and he needs therapy. And he'll come in here and he'll be really worried. Am I a narcissist? And I'm like, dude, if you're worried about whether or not you're a narcissist, you're probably not. Because do you know the one question that is actually clinically effective in helping you determine if someone's a narcissist?
If they think that they might be?
Asking them if they think they are. And if a real narcissist will have no problem admitting that they don't see it as a problem. So, but honestly, much of the time, I see folks that either genuinely are, or I see the word getting thrown around a little too much, but let's use the word grandiosity. Let's use the word, you're going one up on somebody else, which we can all be capable of at times. But yeah, anytime there's that power differential in the relationship, especially when it's being manipulated and abused intentionally, whether financially, emotionally, psychologically, or using the kids or whatever, all of that is essentially about control. And when it leaves one of the partners just feeling completely powerless, confused, wondering, is it me? My partner's trying to tell me that I'm the one. And if you're the one worried about that and asking the question, then you're probably not the one.
That's a great way to put it. If you're the one worrying about, it's probably not the case. And that's so important, I think, for people to hear. I think if they're especially if they have trauma and they're already shaming themselves or feeling like they're not good enough, having a partner that's telling them you're not good enough is just going to reinforce that. Right. And create that silence that happens, right, where they don't talk to their friends, they don't tell anyone else. And then, so it's interesting too, what was the family dynamic they were raised in, where we don't talk about it, or we don't, we just shove it under the rug and try to make sure everything looks okay. I see that so much and you're looking at different family systems, our own family systems. If we're not trying to more aware and conscious of how we're parenting and how we are with our partners, we're going to repeat those patterns that we were modeled for us. And I think that's, one of my biggest things is bringing to consciousness, right? And making mindful choices of what kind of partner do you want to be? What kind of parent do you want to be? So that you're not just doing what your parents did.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that is, our default settings when things get difficult in our relationship is to respond to that difficulty the way we responded to the difficulties in our family of origin. And we're either going to respond to our partner the way we responded to our parents, or we're going to treat our partner the way our parents treated each other or us. And though those 90% of the time, it's one of those two things or both of those things. And then we, when none of that works, we just start pulling away. And it's
Yeah.
that pulling away piece where I try to, I would love to be there at that point when they're starting to pull away. They're starting to really feel the distance, and they would like to be able to communicate the way they used to, or the way they never have before, to reconnect again. That's what I love
And
helping people do.
yeah, I think that's such important work. And as you're talking about that, I really think, when you're working with families, what were some of the things, that you guys worked as a team, right? Dealing with people that were in treatment with patients with trauma addiction, but also the families coming in and them having a lot of these dynamics that,
Yeah,
right, that
yeah,
aren't healthy, right? And the
yeah,
families come, but they're not in treatment. They're just there, right? Going, I'm supporting, but really they're part of it. I know that you guys would help teach communication and boundaries and all of that in the family week. What are some things you would pass on to family members of, people that, are struggling, but also for the family members to also, maybe do some things differently, just in connection and communication with each other when
yeah,
they're, because, let's be honest, most families have some abuse, something in it, right? That isn't
yeah.
functional. How do we navigate these family reunions or when things are difficult?
Well, I'll give you a practical tip. I've had clients that, they're getting ready to go back to a family reunion. They're really anxious. They're worried about getting caught up in the drama of everything. And I tell them, I say, I want you to have the mindset that you're going in as if you're the producer of a reality show. And
Hmm.
you are there to see if this family is going to be a good candidate for your new show. And every time something really dramatic happens, you're thinking, wow, this is going to look great on the show. That's really going to pull the audience in.
That's
So,
great mindfulness technique, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
getting them to take a
So
step out of it. Beautiful. Love
I had I actually told a friend to try that out recently. He was
it.
going
Okay.
to a family member's funeral, and he knew that there was going to be drama. And so he did that. He just imagined that he had a little handheld camera with him the whole time, that he was filming and getting some B-roll for his new show. But yeah, that drama there. My favorite definition of drama, unproductive intensity. Uh,
Unproductive intensity.
yeah.
Yeah.
I learned that in my personality disorder training several years ago. But you 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 mentioned the family work that we did at the Meadows, and one of the things that we would teach them is in so many words and a bit of a trying to teach it in a way that's accessible is family systems theory and identifying the roles that we all fall into. And one of the roles that's really common in a family is the scapegoat. This is the person that we're just going to get to blame all the problems on them because they're the obvious problem right now, whether it's uh, someone that's overreacting to everything or someone with an addiction or whatever. And so my encouragement to families is to recognize that the problem is the system that we're in and the roles that we've all unconsciously fallen into or has been assigned to us even unintentionally, whether it's the scapegoat that everyone just blames for all the drama in the family, or the mediator or the placator that's job's just to make sure everything stays calm. And so we all tend to fall into these roles. And what I would encourage anyone in a dysfunctional family system, and frankly, that's all of us, is to just be mindful of the boundaries that you can put in place to keep yourself out of the role. Even if it's as simple as repeating a little mantra to yourself that says, I don't do drama.
I
Thanks
don't do.
for thanks for asking, but I don't do drama. You don't have to say that literally to everybody, but to have that mindset,
Yeah.
or just to think to yourself, I'm just here to film
Yeah.
for
Just
my new show.
go.
But being mindful of those roles and not necessarily trying to place the blame on figuring out who's the problem. Okay, what you're doing right now is a problem, or what you're doing is the problem. No, the fact that we are all still participating in this same dysfunctional pattern. The problem is the problem, not you, not me. And we all have a choice to either keep playing by those old rules or to uh, set some healthy boundaries, even if it's just a psychological boundary in our own mind that says, thanks, but that's not me. It's that internal boundary more than anything else, I think, that
Yeah,
will
and
keep us sane.
I think like one thing too, a lot of people will just not see family if there's been some abuse or, they'll
Yeah.
just avoid completely. And what do what do you suggest when, they want to see the family, but they know maybe the abuser is going to be at an event or something like that, or
Yeah.
maybe the family's trying to make it nice, like you guys got to get along, and it's like, well, no, we don't. What do you?
Yeah.
And I think that's really common. I think we
So
run into that a lot.
that's when I tell folks to, if they really feel like they need to go, and it's, I mean, there are times where I would support someone not attending something like that
Mhm,
under those circumstances, and they want to go anyway, which I don't think is a wrong choice. I
mhm,
don't think there is a right or wrong choice there.
yeah,
Uh, but I tell them just focus on civility. You don't have to be kind and affectionate.
right.
Don't be unkind, but you don't have to focus on kindness. You don't have to focus on respect. Just focus on
Mhm,
civility.
mhm,
Uh, and I think if you can focus on being civil,
mhm,
which I suppose is just another way to say healthy boundaries in place.
mhm.
Um, and it is okay to steer clear of certain people, uh, whether it's with a boundary that, boundaries are flexible, but with some people you might need a wall,
Yeah.
and just say, I'm going, but I'm not going to be talking to that person over there. And you might want to enlist someone in the family to be a bit of a wingman for you to help you with that
Mhm,
boundary or that wall.
mhm,
And a wall is okay if someone's being toxic and abusive with
mhm.
you. That's more than just a boundary. A wall is fine there.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice for people, or just for people to hear that, and just to own, right, that sometimes it is a wall, and that's okay, especially if there's safety. In that case, you may say you don't go to that event, right? If it's a
Yeah.
safety thing, if they're still unsafe, and sometimes that is what I say to clients, like that person is dangerous, really, and
Yeah.
for you, your nervous system, it's relapse or whatever it is, right? It's not okay, it's not safe for you. But and again, we talk about emotional safety, psychological safety, but again, you're right. There is this option, right, of civility. Because I think there's something about and I talk about forgiveness in my book, but I think the self-forgiveness, but I think forgiving others doesn't mean we're going to let them hurt us again, right? Forgiving
Right.
others isn't, yeah, come back in and, violate
Yeah.
my boundaries. Like, no, like I can forgive
Yeah.
and, let go.
I think a phrase that we don't hear often enough is toxic forgiveness,
Toxic
where,
forgiveness.
yeah,
Thank you, Brent.
yeah,
Brent, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
toxic forgiveness when you are forgiving someone at the expense of your own emotional, spiritual, and especially physical well-being.
Yes.
Uh, and especially if you've got kids, if you're showing up at that family reunion or that event and your kids are along, you don't want to put them in a position of any type of danger. You also want to be mindful of the example that you're setting for your kids about what it means to set healthy boundaries. Unfortunately, our kids have probably seen us on many occasions, placate abusive or just intrusive people in our family. Um, so it's not just for us; it's for what we want to teach our kids as well, how we
I've
interact with that.
Yeah, I've uncomfortably been a strong advocate for change with that. And it doesn't make me popular, and that's okay. That's okay. I just, for me, a survivor, all the things, I just want it to be different for them. And I think when we
Yeah,
do placate or allow, or, we're kind of saying it's okay. And I know that's hard and sometimes it's not possible, but I really think whenever we can be that advocate for change, even in the family system, even if it makes us unpopular, even if it makes
yeah,
us, but if it's showing our children, right, you can have a voice. You don't have to be, feel afraid or anything like that. I think it is very powerful catalyst for change, but
yeah,
not always. I get it. It's not always possible for everyone. So
yeah. And it's not always possible, and it is okay, I think, at times strategically to say, you know what, and I'm not talking about something abusive or out of line, but I'll do the inside game to make sure that I'm going to be emotionally okay, and I will allow myself to tolerate something that I normally would.
Mhm.
There are times where that is okay. Uh,
Yeah,
Not many, but
yeah,
there's
yeah,
a few. But there's a
yeah.
few.
Yeah, there's the example someone once gave me, right, of the family member with dementia, saying some things that were not appropriate, but again, people
Yeah.
understood, right, that
Yeah.
they're not well, and we're not going to make a big drama and set a scene. I mean, that's making it, it's right. You have to really look at the
Right.
context, and I get that, and I think,
It depends.
yeah,
It depends. It depends. It depends. There are times where, uh, you don't want to do that in front of your kids. You don't want to say to your kids, that's just how grandpa is. Let's just act like we didn't hear that. Uh, there are times where that is not the right way to go.
right,
And it depends.
yep,
When
context.
I was still in school working on my degree, I had a supervisor and he loved to say that it depends. And every time he did, he'd act like he was pulling a pair of depends. That was his sense of humor. But it depends. And there's a lot of things like that in life in general. And that's okay.
Yeah.
The answer isn't always black or white, right or wrong.
It is complicated. It's complex. I mean, that's, I think, why one of the reasons even though my book is very interactive and people can work through some things, through writing and all that, I really encourage having a guide, a therapist, a coach, somebody
Yeah.
along the way, because it is complex. And not every situation is going to have the same, fix it. We've got to look at the whole thing. How do you feel about it? What's coming up? And it does take that. We could be our own therapist. We would, but it's just
Yeah.
not a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I appreciate your time and coming and talking and educating us, and and just thank you so much. Is there anything else just in your life that you do just to kind of like end that brings you joy, just raises your level of happiness? Maybe a simple practice that you kind of try to do a little bit of weekly or daily.
Yeah. I think that number one, nutrition. I've been on a nutrition journey for the last 2.5 years, and that has really made a huge difference. There's so much about our nutrition and diet that affects not just our physical health, but our emotional health as well. And that's had a huge impact on my life. Um, I love hiking. Unfortunately, arthritis in my knee has sidelined me from hiking for a little while, but I love to make sure that I've got some time outside. Right now, that's a little hard because here we are in October and it's still 100-something degrees in Phoenix, which is awful. Fall is broken right now. No, to me, over the last few years, along with the nutrition journey, has been just hiking or doing something outdoors, something that moves, literally moves you along.
Yeah.
So that's important to me. And then, one healthy relationship practice that I try to do that makes me happy and helps my marriage is several nights a week, my wife and I, just when everything else is all done, we go for a 15-20 minute walk together and decompress. So thankfully our kids are at an age where we can just go do that. But to me, it is more so about the little things that can have a big impact. We want to look for the best ROI, the return on investment on how we spend our time and what we're going to do to improve ourselves. And for me, over the last few years, that's been nutrition and exercise and time with my family.
Thank you, Brent. And I agree. I think, it is those little things, those daily practices that we continue to do, right, that do create a big changes in our lives, right? It could be changing that diet, going for that walk every day. Like it could be 15 minutes, right? It could be really, it's just the consistency, the practices of it that are life changing. So thank you again for being
Thanks
on the
for having me
Happiness
on.
Playbook series. I'd love to invite you back whenever you want. It's so good to get some education for all of us. And I love to just give back with these podcasts to people, just help educate. And Brent, again, in the North Valley, couples work, check him out. Thank you so much. Is there a website you want to drop here for people?
Yeah.
northvalleytherapy.org. Thank you again, Brent. And we will definitely catch up soon.
Thanks, Ria.